Time zones, the only verified means to time travel. And it works like a charm. Simply by crossing an imaginary line, you can gain or lose an hour. Today, we look into why humans can't even agree on what time it is, let alone anything else.
Time is one of the most complicated philosophical issues in the world. Time is a social construct, and it is not given, but it is also man-made.
We all have the same amount of time. We are using it maybe the wrong way, maybe for things that we should not or don't want to use them for. More and more is demanded from the people of our time in less and less time. So that's why we have so many cases of burnout.
You have to be struggling with time, trying to pick out any way you can fit until eventually you're in your late 20s and then you're asked to go on talk shows to talk about how bad you are at timekeeping. So,
thanks for coming, though. We don't pay James also. We don't have that kind of money.
I'm happy to be here.
Hello and welcome to Standard Time. I am Reka Kinga-Pop, your host and editor-in-chief of Eurozine, the magazine behind this show. Eurozine is an online platform that connects over 100 cultural journals, reaching a global audience. We also take pride in being a founding member of the Display Europe platform, where we present diverse content from across Europe in 15 languages. Let's start with a fun fact. Did you know that some European countries are in time zones that geographically make zero sense for them? Spain, for instance, is on the same time as Poland, despite being way far apart. It's a hangover from World War II, like so many other things, when countries were aligning their clocks with their allies or occupiers. Spain under Franco switched to Central European time in 1940 in order to align their clocks with Hitler's.
I don't think he's a watchmaker.
I have proof. I designed already this very cuckoo clock.
And that Central European time is where they remain until today, even though they geographically fit better with Greenwich Mean Time. Similarly, countries like France, Belgium, the Netherlands and Luxembourg under German occupation also adopted Central European time. Some propose splitting Europe into 4 equal time zones based on natural time, ensuring that the sun is at its highest at noon. Speaking of falling out of sync, did you know that daylight savings time was first introduced during World War I to save coal? Fast forward to today, and it's become a hot debate again across Europe. In 2018, the EU conducted a survey where 84% of participants wanted to abolish the switch between DST and Standard Time. Even though the vast majority wants change, nothing much has happened since then. Time zones and daylight saving time aren't just about what time we set our clocks to, they're about health too. Studies show an increase in heart attacks and other health complications right after the DST switch. It's like our bodies are saying, hey, you can't just snatch a full hour from me and expect no consequences. The issue is with our internal clocks, because we humans are mostly tuned to a circadian rhythm, more or less aligned with sunlight and dark periods. When we rearrange chronological order, this biological tune falls out of sync with our social clocks, that is, the schedule our societies operate on. And yet, despite overwhelming public support to stop messing with the clocks, we're stuck in this time warp of bureaucracy. So next time you grumble about losing an hour of sleep or gaining one, remember it's not just you. It's a continent-wide, history-laden, politically charged chronobiological puzzle. And who knows, maybe one day we'll all just decide to live according to a sun clock, wake up with our roosters no matter what the clock says. Tonight, we have a couple of guests who will help us make sense of this timely mess. Professor Dietrich Henkel is from the German Association for Time Policies. He specializes in urban and regional economics. His research covers urban time structures, time policies, and the impact of light pollution on cities. He's joining us online. With me at the Alte Schmiede Kunstverein here in Vienna is Dr. Imre Márton Reményi. He's a Budapest-born and Vienna-raised expert with a diverse background. Started in mechanical engineering, then opera singing, before transitioning to a career as a coach, trainer, organizational consultant, and the president of the Austrian Burnout Society, while also being a psychotherapist. To lighten the mood and introduce a different sense of chronology, Comedian James Irons will also join us here to explain his peculiar personal relationship with time. So let's get started because I'm running out of time puns. Hello and very welcome. Thank you all, gentlemen, for taking the time and meeting with me to talk about time. When this episode airs, we will have just changed calendars recently, and why not celebrate and discuss time, which I used to think was kind of like a God-given thing and flows exactly as it should, but it turns out it's way more complicated than I was informed. I also wasn't informed that there are options. So let me ask Professor Henkel first, what kind of options we might look out for in European timekeeping? You study timekeeping policies. How would you describe Europe's relationship with timekeeping right now?
Time is one of the most complicated issues in philosophical issues in the world. And so time is a social construct, and it is not given, but it is also man-made. This is one point why we founded the German Society for Time Policies.
So what are these delicate issues that you wish were addressed better?
Place is very common for us to be planned, but time is only implicitly planned. School beginning times, labor times, all is in some kind or the other regulated or coordinated. And this is often not done explicitly. We claim that it is necessary to take time into explicit perspective to improve the welfare and the living conditions of the people in Europe or anywhere in the world.
Dr. Dramini, you come in from a different angle, not really time policy. You support people in managing their time as a psychotherapist and a time management coach. Do you stand there with a stopwatch beside my children and make them get ready to school on time, which I'm not able to, or how does that look in practice?
The point is that in psychological ideas, we have two kinds of time. The so-called chronological time, from Chronos, one god of time in Greek mythology, who has the standard division of time into equal sections, and Kairos, which is more flexible division of time. So it is the coordination between these two types of time that some things simply take their time, and you cannot tell your child, oh, you fell, I'm so sorry for you, I have 2 minutes to console you. It's impossible, you know. Or you meet your wife and you say, okay, darling, we have 2 minutes, let's make love real quickly. It's impossible. I mean, sometimes it happens.
2 minutes is a long time.
Well, including undressing and everything, you know.
Look, you're very young. You're going to learn.
No, generally, more and more is demanded from the people of our time in less and less time. So that's why we have so many cases of burnout, and that's why we have more and more people coming to us with marriage problems, with educational problems, with problems in finding happiness in their life.
But there is a neurological component to sensing time and understanding time. And James, maybe you want to tell us about this, because in your stand-up comedy, you also talk about your experience with time, but you are also a theater person. You run on a different clock than the rest of society. So there's multiple components there.
Yeah, whereas with the other two guests, they're coming from a more academic standpoint. Mine is, of course, all anecdotal.
Which we love.
Which we love.
Let's not berate that. That's why you're here.
Part of my comedy act that you're talking about is where I talk about ADHD and being neurodivergent in that sense, which leads to all sorts of things happening throughout the day that, for me, feel very, very normal. But whereas for a person who has a better grasp on how time works, they can, I guess, better compartmentalize what they need to do within what time. And even though it can feel like I'm doing the exact things in the right order, getting up, taking a shower, eating breakfast, and it feels like those things should take 15 to 20 minutes, it can take a very long time. It can take 45, 50, an hour. It can take a very long time. And it's not until I think about why that is, and then, oh, it's because I spent, even though I thought I brushed my teeth and then took a shower straight away, it could be I brushed my teeth and then stared at the wall for about 5 minutes because there was a bug on it, and the bug was really, really interesting, and I wanted to follow the bug.
Wasn't this a joyful point in your day, though, looking at the bug? Like, these seem to me, just from the stories, that these are actually like really nice times if you had them, if you could spend them this way, right?
Sure, if you can spend that time, if you have that time, it can be nice. It's nice not to have the stress and the pressure of confining to a time span. But that's kind of not how society is. It's not society isn't a place where you are often afforded that time. Another job that I do on part-time is I work in gastronomy, or night gastronomy specifically, which is, again, not a 9 to 5. It's not the standard of what we are taught living is supposed to be. And a lot of people I find in those jobs who have these odd hours are people who are similar to me in terms of how their chemistry works. Is the time is more difficult to contain. And there has to be a reason for that. There has to be a reason why people who are neurally divergent and more less strict and stringent with time physically can't cope with the framework that we have. You're finished work at 4, you're in bed by 5. Getting a doctor's appointment is nigh on impossible for those people. So it makes living in a society that is so focused on time quite difficult.
Yeah, I think for many of us, it's very regularized institutions that enforce this time regime. I remember getting out of school and just not knowing when things were supposed to happen because I had never had that kind of freedom. How am I supposed to know when a shower is over? Let's talk about daylight savings time and its effect, because some of these time policies, although I personally don't really have a big problem with daylight savings time, but a lot of people do. And it also shows up in statistics that many health complications tend to extrapolate or shoot up, switching from daylight savings time to standard time in the spring, when we basically, how we phrase it is we lose an hour. How do you see this policy of daylight savings? What would be your standpoint on this?
The issue is the alignment between solar cycles and social cycles. And what daylight saving time does is to misalign solar cycles and social cycles. And I would like to come back to your first intervention when you mentioned the problems of school children and how to dress and how to come to school. The majority of chronobiologists say that school times are too early. And therefore, if you want to improve children's learning performance, you should adjust school times, for instance. And that is one of these issues of time policy, how to improve society to get better results with respect to learning, to well-being, and so on and so forth.
Do you think that people, when they gain time, actually use more time up? Or can we actually shift to a better economy with our personal times?
Well, first of all, we all have the same amount of time. If we say we have no time, we are not saying the truth. What we are saying is that we are using it maybe the wrong way, maybe for things that we should not or don't want to use them for. Or we have the feeling that we don't use it with our self-direction, but rather because somebody else is putting a certain regime on us. So we are not independent in our use of our own time.
You're saying is that in a time management attitude or in a state of mind where we are not properly conscious of use of time, that doesn't necessarily solve the problem, right?
People have to learn to manage their time by themselves, which is also to keep certain influences away from themselves. So people who want my time, and I have to say, yes, of course, but in 3 weeks, not right now.
That's like an etiquette of
Yes.
setting my own clock and not adjusting to someone necessarily immediately, right? Which I also struggle with. Like, how do I deny people what they demand of me right now and then tell them, okay, come back to me later? Apparently, for instance, in the Netherlands, this kind of scheduling well ahead, is much more part of the social interaction.
I could show you my calendar. It goes till 2026. But what I'm really going to emphasize is that school is not intended, we have to accept that, to train our children to be happy. It's intended to make them good members of the workforce. Do we want to be good members of the workforce? Or do we want to be happy and satisfied members of humanity? So time is at our disposal, or as the Rolling Stones said, time is on my side.
You thought that was all we had on time? We also have an extended conversation about time, daylight, sleep, and productivity with Joao Nunes of Better Times. Listen to it on the program of Gagarin, the Eurozine podcast.
If we want to have one shoe fits all, so a single time, which I am not a fan of, but we'll get into it, then it has to be more inclusive. For schoolers, it's even worse, just to make it clear, because we do not express the same chronotype over time.
On Gagarin, you can listen to full episodes of the Standard Time talk show, as well as in-depth conversations with Eurozine authors and editors from all over Europe. So go to eurozine.com/Gagarin, subscribe and listen. And now back to the program.
I do feel like all this talk about work-life balance, which I would love to have, but I don't have the time to set that up, and it also has a very strong gender aspect.
Work-life balance, it's usually written work-life-balance.
Yeah.
And that's wrong. It's supposed to be work-life-balance, which means that the balance happens within your work life and not outside.
So my problem with this is that it's a very individual approach, or the discourse, I feel, often places the responsibility on the individual person to cope with a whole regime that is not necessarily set up for them to thrive.
You sort of do have to kind of like fine and deviate and sort of, because you have to fit in somewhere, right? Otherwise, you'll be, careening through sort of life, really struggling. You have to struggling with time, trying to pick out any way you can fit until eventually you're in your late 20s, and then you're asked to go on talk shows to talk about how bad you are at timekeeping. So
thanks for coming, though. We don't pay James also. We don't have that kind of money.
I'm happy to be here. Most people, I think, innately have some kind of natural rhythm that they fall into when they have nothing. And that's not always necessarily the 9 to 5. Why is the 9 to 5 such a popular thing to the point where it's terminology, it's linguistical terminology?
Speaking from a post-Soviet country, for us, the start time would be 8 a.m. Mm-hmm. And then you just don't stop working, frankly. Like, especially if you start at your assigned time of end of a shift, in some situations you would get the looks, because just keeping the limits of your own time is very heavily judged, and then you are not deemed a good enough employee. Dr. Rameni, what would be like an intervention point when somebody's whole relationship with their own time is based on just external factors? How do you get started with these people?
There are various ways, depending on the person. One way would be to, for example, I have devised a sheet for them: early morning, noon, afternoon, and evening, the 7 days, and then one column planned, the other column done. And then there's a column of 7 yellow faces with eyes but without mouth. So they can write in what they have planned for that day. Then they write in, for example, taking a shower. Yes, I've taken a shower for 2 hours. Why not? It's okay. Going to the doctor? No, instead I went to the park. And at the end, you have this face. And you give a mouth to that face. Are you satisfied with the day as it went? Or are you dissatisfied? Or was it so-so? The object of this whole thing is to get at least 4 smiles out of the week. Many people know the Eisenhower principle of urgent and important. So what is urgent and important? What is urgent but not important? What is important but not urgent? And what is neither of them? So, and then at the end of the day, you cluster them. How much did I spend on emails? How much time did I spend on phone calls with friends, with clients, with people trying to sell me Viagra or whatever? And then...
They sell me Botox, the same people.
Oh,
they
yes.
sell you Viagra.
They love to sell those things. I once had a client, who complained that he was working 80 hours per week. And I told him, listen, I have a very, very important job for you that takes 20 hours per week from you, but you are not allowed to work 100. You have to get down to 60 so I can give you those the 20 hours job. And after a month, he came back and he said, I have reduced my activities by 20 hours per week. Okay, where's the job? I said, okay, what are the things you are going to do in these 20 hours for yourself? Go to a gym, take walks, go to the movies, find a girlfriend, and those things.
I can tell you what I would do with the 20 hours. I would lay on my back, and that would be all my activities. It sounds sometimes maybe on my stomach. That's also like a preferable situation.
So sit down and find those 20 hours.
You also mentioned the 4 smiles a week. That's about the amount that I afford my kids.
Yes.
They don't deserve too much more than that. You have to keep them on a short leash. Of course, I don't do that.
Of course not.
Let's come back to Professor Henkel. When we talk about timekeeping policies, there are, of course, these policies which are on a sweeping basis, like time zones. And we know that time zones across Europe are not very well allocated, have a strong political component to them that traces back to the 30s and the 40s, actually. And much of Europe is actually out of sync with its actual sunlight rhythm. So how would you propose we reassign time across Europe?
Yes, you are right that many time zones in Europe are not aligned to the solar cycles. For instance, the extreme example is Spain, because Franco decided he wanted to live in the same time zone as Hitler. The Spanish still have the Central European time. And the misalignment increases with summertime when you spring forward another hour. And therefore, redesigning the time zones or part of the time zones in Europe smoothly with national borders. It would not increase the number of time zones, but only the allocation of time zones to different countries and to the solar cycles. Aligning social and solar cycles would not solve all the problems we have with timekeeping and temporal issues, but the health issues which are resulting from a severe misalignment could be reduced. And this is not a trivial point of improvement.
As we know, in the Middle Ages, even every town had its own time. And the time was denominated by the church clock. all that construction became because we became more and more cosmopolitan and connected.
That's true. Of course, the time zones are a compromise to allow international and global coordination of times. But it is a compromise being rather closely aligned to the solar cycles. This compromise, which was found in 1884 with the Meridian Conference, is not put in motion at every place, and we could improve it to align the time zones to the solar cycles much better than we do at the moment in many places of the world, and especially in Europe.
I'm in favor of that. I am one of these people who are trying to climb back to being more of a morning person, not just because there's a school run, but just because that used to be more of a sort of natural cycle for me at some point back in the day. But that really clashes with the circumstances that I find more productive for myself for certain creative processes. And then I want to come back to you, James, because the way we know each other as stand-up comics from a comedy club, that's a nighttime thing. And it is rarely done in the broad daylight for mostly cultural and historical reasons, of course, but it does have to do something with the whole dark and intimacy and sort of past hours or late hours feel of the genre, doesn't it?
It's definitely got more of a charm to it because of how comedy is. It's definitely, comedy breaches over so many different topics that can cross the taboo. It crosses a lot of people's boundaries. It's not necessarily in the watershed, if we're going to put it in TV terms, which, you know, a lot of those processes take place at night. And again, within the shroud of night, it does make a lot of sense. But it all comes from the need of the majority having a working schedule, and then there's an allocated time for them for entertainment. In theatre, even though there's a matinee, which is something that happens 2 p.m., the shows that happen at night at 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock, whatever, are always a lot more attended. And that's because a lot more people can go there. So I think with that, comedy also just naturally happens there because that's what the time slot that we allocate free time. That's the time slot that we allocate fun and entertainment. Even on online entertainment, where it's you don't necessarily have to be in a certain location. If you go to, I don't know, live streamers on Twitch or whatever, most of them broadcast to when their audience is at home, because they know their majority audience, which may be in the west coast of the US, it's 11 or something like that, and that's when they're most likely to see their content. But when society is allocated for them, when they are allowed to be free and enjoy and be entertained by something. So I think it leans more towards that, I would say.
I see a huge market niche there. It turns out that red light districts where they are thoroughly organized experience a huge surge at lunchtimes. So maybe for stand-up comics also relegated to the night and other forms of entertainment, we should invent those sort of lunchtime menu shows, like a lunch menu, you know, 2 courses, just get it in, get it out of the canteen, you stand up on top of the tables and then just have it over with. It would fit with my personal rhythm much better, for sure.
All right, then I'll open up a cafe for that next week.
Okay,
We'll see what we can do.
I prefer to start a change on the individual level, and there is even a joint effort which we have in Austria and in Germany, by the way. It's called the Verein zur Verzögerung der Zeit, which means not that we should slow down time, but that every once in a while we should step out of time to look, hey, where am I going? What's happening? Am I still going the right direction? Am I still in the right movie? And then maybe even change things. During the time I was an opera singer, I had to be fit at night. Now that I'm a psychotherapist and a university teacher, I have to be fit in the morning. And I think I was able to change my time level, my time use. So reflect your use of your time.
This applies to a certain strata of people in society, and this doesn't apply to those who do actually fall actual victim to predatory employment, for instance. Yeah. So there is kind of a colonization of the employee's time. And I used to never understand why the workers' movements used to be so focused on working time. And now I understand it much better, because that's the factor that you can actually enumerate. Many factors in labor you can't really account for otherwise than by time. And what we see is that we're terrified that the machines, automation, and AI are going to take our jobs, but instead of absorbing work and freeing people up, it's actually increasing pressure on the labor force to stand their ground even more.
The labor organizations have been very strong in this field, and they have achieved quite a lot of benefits for working people. However, if the working people are not willing to become members of the unions, my wife is very, very active in the labor time legislation and movement. And she's frustrated because all the good ideas are smashed down with the argument, well, your own people don't want it. What do you want from us?
We extend our gratitude to our partner, the Alte Schmiede Kunstverein here in Vienna. Nestled in the heart of the city, Alte Schmiede is not just an artistic venue, but a cultural hub, fostering a vibrant community of artists and thinkers. Dedicated to promoting a contemporary art and literature scene, it provides a dynamic space for exhibitions, readings, and workshops. Check out their program at alteschmiede.at. This episode is presented by Eurozine, your destination for thought-provoking articles from over 100 partner journals in various languages. You can support us and enjoy exclusive benefits by visiting patreon.com/Eurozine to become a patron with contributions starting from €3 a month. James, we mentioned technology briefly. There's a lot of talk about how screen time eats up our attention, which of course is much more severe for people who have an issue with attention. You're also the resident young person here, so tell us what's new in tech.
Well, a lot of tech companies, such as YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, the social medias pretty much, they're all gravitating more and more towards the same thing, which is engaged watch time. All they want is to grab attention on their app as long as possible, and they encourage all of their users in order to do that. Forcing comment engagement in order to make videos repeat over and over again in order to get more watch time while they're looking at the comments and engaging in comment sections, or just longer videos or longer form videos in general. Even if you press the back button, if you try and go exit the app on TikTok, the first thing it does is suggest you another video first immediately. You have to press out a couple of times for it to close the app for you, because it wants you to stay. It actively wants you to stay there. And what that results in, especially when you're someone like me who is very easily distracted, you'll be going through your day, and then you open your phone because, oh, I've got some emails to do. Oh, what's happening on Instagram right now? And then all of a sudden it's half an hour has passed and you've engaged in nothing but watching, I don't know, a man punch a tree for multiple videos, which is a guy. I don't think people acknowledge as much as, say, sort of like an addictive time consumer as maybe they should. I mean, it is spoken about, of course, but it's such a time suck, especially for the young. There is no structure. It is just you're going to be on your phone and you're going to keep swiping until you see something that is so egregious that you're like, that's enough internet for today.
These applications are basically imitating this like absent-minded, unfocused attention. I want to come back to Professor Henkel and ask you about whether you would tell us about the relationship of cities with time and the built environment with time.
I would like to come back first to the other question, whether there is an overarching point of intervention for improvement of time. And I'm afraid I'm not convinced that there is, but there are very different types of intervention. And one is the individual one, which you put forward, and the necessity of people being more aware of temporal issues and being able to decide themselves of how to use their time and coordinate themselves within time. And the other point is that we have bring forward instruments explicitly to improve the temporal organization of society, being it later school hours, more flexible schedules, and so on and so forth. So many points of intervention which have to be temporal policy within our societies. And I would also mention the Barcelona Declaration on Time Policies, which was issued during the Barcelona Time Use Week in 21, which also made an important point on the right to time, human right to decide over one's own time. There's a lot to do also within cities to coordinate the schedules of different means of public transport, facilitate traveling within cities, cycling lanes, and so on, is a redistribution of space within the cities, but it's, on the other hand, also a redistribution of time for different participants in the transport in the cities. We want to get delivered things we ordered within an hour. Amazon is making its publicity about it. And the side effect is that the delivery cars are parking in blocking the traffic for other people and producing a loss of times for people who never were involved in this consumer act.
I would actually argue that the faster and lower personal investment the purchases, the more problematic purchases we tend to make. So the more I have to think about something before picking it up or picking it out and having to wait for it, the more I lament whether this is actually necessary. It would be lovely to round out this nice discussion with a very deliberately silly question. What would you like to just immediately receive a chunk of time for something? Would it be a month to lay on a beach? Would it be just a few hours to catch up with something? What is the next thing that you will try to make time for?
Whatever I would like to make time for, I take it. And already now I'm spending Tuesday to Thursday in Vienna, also working with my clients, and Friday to Monday in the countryside. I'm happy with that time.
So you're a Dimido professor now, or a Dimido therapist, basically.
No, I'm an honorary pensioner.
Yes. James, what's a next chunk of time that you would like to just grab out of the time-space continuum, have for yourself?
It's on Instagram Reels, probably, for 2 hours, probably tonight. But maybe I'll get a croissant at some point in between.
Professor Henkel, what's the next chunk of time that you would want to have? Just like
I'm also in the privileged situation that I can deliberately decide on my time. I have the right to my time, more or less, in a very broad sense. And I think this is a kind of privilege which should be widely diffused, and this is what I'm fighting for.
Thank you. I can tell you that the next chunk of time that I would like to have is some off time with my family when they have done their chores and I have done mine, and there's nothing left to do for like 3 hours when I don't have to get the kids to do stuff next and get to places. That would be splendid. So thank you for your time and your attention. And I hope to see you, well, I see you on stage in a few weeks at most.
Sure.
Thank
It's
you.
been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Our talk show is produced by Display Europe, a fresh content sharing platform that prioritizes your data privacy. It features diverse topics from politics to culture. And special thanks to the Alte Schmiede for hosting us today. This program is jointly funded by the Creative Europe program of the European Union and the European Cultural Foundation. Please note that the views expressed here are those of the authors and the speakers only. They do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the European Union or the European Education and Culture Executive Agency.